On today's video, we're going to discuss 9 tools to make cutting and installing your track, as well as wiring it, a whole lot easier. The first item I have for you is the Elecriduct Zip Tie Gun. It's exactly what it sounds like. It takes zip ties and tightens them. So you can use this with either a large or a small zip tie. You can even use it on some of the larger ones, but the idea here is it tightens it for you and cuts it off. And the nice thing about this gun is it doesn't leave sharp edges. They're not going to cut you. So again, we'll do this with a small one as well. Another nice thing about the zip tie gun is it's actually adjustable. If you look down here, there's a little wheel you can spin to make it tighter or looser. So with these, particularly the smaller zip ties, I actually have this set for the large ones, so it cuts pretty flush there, but the little ones stick out a little bit. You can adjust this little wheel and get that so it's flush as well. And at only $14, it's a heck of a steal. Again, that's the Elecriduct Zip Tie Gun. This next product I have for you actually goes along the same lines as the zip tie gun. This is actually cable mounts. So these are actually sold in a pack of 100. They come with the zip ties, and they actually come with screws, although I'm using different screws here. But the general idea is that you can actually mount your wires up underneath your layout. And I'm just doing this on a flat surface as an example. But the idea here is, again, zip tie. And with the gun, and it holds the wires nice and secure. And at only $9, it's a heck of a steal. So when you get quite a bit for $9, actually, 100 of these actually goes a long way. I usually use about 50 on a layout, so 2 layouts out of 1 package, it's a good deal. The third item I have for you is called a sprue cutter. Unlike a pair of track cutters, these are not made for cutting the track. That'll actually ruin it. But what it does instead is it will allow you to cut plastic nice and straight. So for example here, I'm just going to cut the middle out of the tie, and it actually cuts it nice and flush. Again, nice and flush. These run about $17, so they're not cheap, but they are a worthy investment. If you're doing any kind of customization, you're working with soft woods or anything else of that nature, it's really a great product to have. On the bottom of this track, for example, I like using these versus track nippers to cut the extra ties off because it leaves a nice smooth surface. Again, that's the Xuron flush trim sprue cutters. So they have a nice long tip so you can get into those little itty bitty places to trim off that extra stuff. The fourth item I have for you is the Weller 40-watt soldering station. Soldering guns are cheap, and these are actually no exception. You can get the soldering gun itself, or soldering iron itself, for about $20. This kit, however, runs about $40, but the nice thing about this is it has this mounting device where you can just leave the hot iron in there. It also has an overheat sensor on it, so if you accidentally leave this on, the iron will actually go cold on you. So it means you're never going to have to worry about your house burning down or anything else. It's also adjustable, so if you're working on small track, for example, you can turn the temperature down so you don't melt the ties. In another future video, I'll be showing you how I modify this so I can get rid of all of the extra cords, and it functions better, it's a little safer, and it gives you more than 3 feet of cord. But this is a great base station if you're doing any kind of hobby modeling whatsoever. It doesn't matter what scale. If you're Z to G, you're going to need a soldering iron at some point. This is a worthwhile investment. The next item on our list is something you probably haven't thought of, but this is replacement soldering tips for your soldering iron. Your Weller soldering iron will burn out after time. This is one of my old tips, and then it just doesn't solder nearly as well as it should. So an investment in some replacement tips is very, very well worthwhile. They are kind of expensive. This little kit of 5 is $13, but it's very, very worth the investment for quality solder joints. If in particular you're soldering a lot of track joints, I really do recommend getting this because this has the pinpoint tips, unlike the original soldering tip that comes with the gun, which is more of a broad tip. So if you want that fine control, go ahead and invest the $13 in this little 5-pack and get yourself some quality soldering. The next item on our list is Ruby fluid, which is a liquid flux. Comes in this giant container, and it's only $6 actually right now, so it's fairly affordable. And what this does is, particularly when you are soldering track joints together, it works very, very well for getting in the little crevices. I don't recommend this for soldering the wires underneath your layout, but I do have another product coming up later in the video which I'll show you on that one. But the nice thing about this is it literally is a liquid. And it goes a very long way. I have built, I kid you not, 12 layouts with this one bottle, and it's not even half empty. The next item up is actually this little plastic bottle here. So as you can tell, I use this for the Ruby fluid, but what it does is this allows you to fine control the application of the soldering fluid. It actually comes with little metal tips, so they're little like needles. It comes in a pack of 6, and it comes with another 12 needles or so of assorted sizes, so you can really fine control your application of this flux. I've also used it for other liquids, including CA glue. So if you're finding yourself in a situation where you want to fine-tune and control the application of something that's very liquid like water, investing in these is not a bad idea. And for 10 bucks for 6 bottles and another 12 applicator tips, not a bad deal. Next up is Oatey No.95 lead-free tinning flux. This is the exact same stuff they use when they're sweating copper pipes in your home, but it works fantastic for model railroads. In particular, I like using this with a very small flathead screwdriver for application, and I use this to flux all of the wires that I'm going to be soldering together underneath the layout. Next up is a product you probably haven't heard of before. This is a 150 watt soldering pot. So rather than using a soldering iron, where you actually apply the solder to the iron and then the solder to the wire itself, you're actually reversing the process and actually just dipping the wire into the solder. The nice thing about a soldering pot is you can do bulk wire all at once. So I can dip this in my Ruby fluid, my liquid flux, so just dip it in and then dip it into the solder pot, and I can pre-tin 50 to even 100 wires depending on the gauge all at once. It saves so much time. It was very, very well worth the $25 investment. So if you're building a large layout, you do a lot of custom wiring work, whether that be model railroading or anything else for that matter, this is definitely a worthwhile investment. The one thing I will warn you, however, is if you have small children, this thing does get very, very hot, and if you touch it, you will burn yourself. I have burnt myself. So use caution if you do have children or somebody like me who's less than cautious than I should be. Next up, I have my Dremel tool, but I don't actually want to talk about the Dremel tool itself. I want to talk about these, the 2-inch fiber disc made by GYROS. This is a fantastic tool, especially if you're going to be cutting O-gauge track or any other kind of track for that matter. It makes sure that your cut is completely vertical. So a normal disc is roughly about half this size. This one's actually a used disc, so it's a little smaller. So it gives you a rough idea. But the idea here is You know, rather than trying to cut on an angle and then coming back and cutting it vertical, this just works. So again, a nice vertical cut, nice clean lines, no real burrs. These are a little pricey at $20 a piece, or $20 for the set, but personally I think it's one of the better $20 purchases I've made in the last 3 years. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about today is wire strippers. Now, as you can tell, I own quite a few pairs, but the one I want to talk to you today are these, which is a wire stripper cutter. And these are self-adjusting, which means they work on thin wire, just like this telephone wire here. So it'll strip off the outer casing, and then it'll strip off the inner casing as well without hurting anything. But works just as well on this 14 gauge wire at the same time. And at only $12, these things are literally a steal, and they are my go-to tool. If you liked today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Most of my videos are on the construction of layouts, but I love to give tool advice too. If you have questions on the type of tools you would like for your project, please don't hesitate to ask. Just go ahead and throw a comment down below, and I'll reply usually within a couple days. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.